I was wiping down a whiskey glass still warm from gunfire when the saloon doors slammed open. 3 ranch hands stumbled in, dragging a girl through the sawdust like she was something they'd hunted. Her dress was torn, her wrists bound with baling twine. Hop Foster, reeking of sweat and spite, slapped a half-empty bottle on my bar and spat. "This buys her ride to wherever she ends up." The room stilled. Even the piano player went silent. Then, from the shadows near the stove, a stranger stood dust. On his coat, iron in his voice. "I'll pay more," he said, voice calm as judgment, every eye turned, every breath held. And just like that, the night rewrote itself. The saloon smelled of old smoke, spilled whiskey, and something mean left to rot. Midnight in Thorn Creek wasn't a time for music, yet the piano was dragging out a tune no one cared to hear, notes wobbling like a drunk on a horse. Kerosene. Lamps hissed above, casting jaundiced light on cracked mirror glass and rough men who knew better than to believe in decency. I was polishing the last clean glass when the doors slammed open like they meant to tear off the hinges, 3 of Hop. Foster's boys stumbled in, boots caked in red clay and cruelty, dragging a girl behind them like she was a mule. Her dress had once been blue. Her wrists were bound in baling twine, and though her cheeks were streaked with dust and fear, her back stayed straight. She didn't speak, didn't cry. That quiet kind of strength. It shouted louder than the men who surrounded her. Hop himself followed, swagger thick in every step. He unstoppered a rye bottle, already half empty, and slammed it on my bar like it was payment. "This here's worth more'n she ever was," he crowed, voice thick with arrogance and sweat. "I say we. Let the boys have their fun. Fair trade, yeah?" A ripple of laughter rolled through the room, nasty, nervous, the kind of laugh men force when they know they're watching something wrong and don't want to admit it. But Lena, though I didn't know her name, yet stood still, chin tilted slightly, eyes not begging but locked on the floor like she had trained herself not to cry. Before I could move, before I could say anything that would get me killed, the stranger in the corner stood up. He hadn't spoken all night. Sut tucked in the shadows near the stove, coat dusted from days of riding, broad hands wrapped around a tin mug. But now he stepped forward, calm as a coming storm. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. "I'll pay more," he said. Everything stopped, even the piano. Someone dropped a card. No one dared pick it up. Foster snorted. "More what? A smile? You don't look like you own a dime." The stranger walked forward slow, like a man who'd never been hurried by fear. From his coat he pulled a small pouch and dropped it on the bar. The soft clink of gold coins hit the wood like thunder. "Double the bottle," the stranger said. "And she walks out. Now, you got dust in your brains, mister," Foster growled. "This ain't no auction. This is Thorn Creek." "Then consider it a final offer," Caleb said, calm but solid. "She leaves with me, or you don't." That was the spark. Foster roared and lunged, bottle raised. I ducked behind the bar, as glass shattered inches from my head. The stranger Caleb, though I wouldn't know his name until later met him square. One blow, just one, Foster dropped like a sack of feed, chairs scraped, guns half drawn. I felt the panic crawling up my spine, but I also felt something else. A reckoning. So I made my choice. From under the bar, I slid Caleb the revolver I kept hidden beneath a towel. His eyes met mine. He nodded once like I'd just passed a test. "Get her out." I hissed. He grabbed Lena's arm, not rough, but firm, and pulled her toward the door. "Stay close," he told her. She did. Foster's men weren't fast enough. We were through the doors and into the street before their barrels rose. Rain was falling now, soft and cold, the kind that smelled like rust and regret. They ran toward the stables, and I followed, shotgun slung under my coat, boots slapping through the mud. I didn't know where they were headed, didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing for damn sure. I wasn't going to let her be bought for a bottle. Not tonight. Not ever again. The prairie stretched endless under a bruised sky, silvered by moonlight and whispering with wind. Our horses moved as 1-3 shadows streaking west, hooves muffled by dry sage and the hush of flight. Lena clung to Caleb, her arms looped. around his coat like she wasn't sure if she was holding on for warmth or because everything else had been stripped from her. She didn't speak, not at first. Just pressed her cheek to his back and let the silence ride between them. We didn't stop until the lantern lights behind us vanished over the last ridge. Then Caleb veered off the trail and led us into a collapsed fence line where an old line shack slumped between two cedars, half swallowed by vines. A shelter, barely, but enough. Inside, the air held the ghosts of old winters and lonely men. We lit a small fire from dry bark and fence posts, letting the glow cast shadows on the plank walls. I could see the tension draining from Lena's shoulders as she sat cross-legged beside the hearth, her boots muddied and too big. Caleb handed her a tin cup. She took it with both hands, like she wasn't used to being offered anything without strings. He sat beside her, slow and steady, then met my eyes across the flames. "You ever heard of the Dawson outfit?" I nodded. "They ran Thorn Creek's rail line, before they vanished like smoke." "They didn't vanish," Caleb said. "They got rich and got cruel. One of 'em's still breathing, owns the cattle spread Foster works for. Took my badge when I asked too many questions. Pinkerton Brass told me to leave it alone. So I did, but I didn't stop watching. He didn't say more, didn't need to. The scar across his temple said enough about where he'd been and who tried to leave him there." Lena, still quiet, looked down at her cup. "My father owed them, gamblers, crook debts. Foster took me to settle it. Said no one would come looking." I watched her carefully. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled when she reached into her pocket for a cigarette paper. She tried to roll it, clumsy from cold and shaking. Caleb reached over, his hands sure and slow, and guided hers, thumb to thumb, palm to palm. The firelight caught on their fingers like it meant something. "You never rolled one?" he asked softly. I was learning. "Before," she said, voice barely above the crackle of the fire. "You're still learning," he replied. She smiled, just a ghost of one. But it stayed. I shifted, pulled the flask from my coat, and took a swig before speaking. "My sister disappeared from Thorn Creek 7 years back. She worked the hotel. One night she never came home. I searched, asked, got told to shut up. Her grave's behind the church now? No marker? Just dirt and lies?" Caleb looked at me long and hard. "That's why you passed me the gun." "Figured I'd waited long enough," I said. Outside, the wind shifted. Coyotes cried from somewhere close, sharp, and hungry. I moved to the doorway, scanning the black beyond the fire's reach. Then I saw it. Distant, flickering orange. Glints on the horizon, lanterns moving fast. "Posse," I hissed. Lena stood instantly, her eyes wide, her body rigid with remembered fear. Caleb threw water over the fire, and the shack plunged into darkness, smoke curling up like a final whisper. We slipped out the back and into the ravine beyond the trees, crouched low as the lanterns bobbed closer. I could hear them now, Foster's voice, loud and angry, cursing into the night. We didn't speak, we didn't breathe. Only when the hoofbeats faded into another valley did Caleb exhale. We had hours till dawn, miles of sagebrush between us and safety. But something had shifted in that shack. The girl they tried to sell wasn't broken, and the man they tried to bury had found his reason to keep fighting. Devil's Gulch was a slot of red rock no wider than a wagon, the kind of place a smart man rode through at a trot and a scared one avoided altogether. We were neither smart nor scared, just out of options, so we pushed the horses into the throat of it while dawn struggled behind us. Crows circled overhead, black flecks against a bruised sky. My palms sweated on the reins. Every clop echoed off stone like a drumbeat counting down. Halfway in, the first shot slammed the cliff face beside my head. Gray dust burst stinging. My eyes, I ducked as 3 riders surged out of the shadows ahead, rifles braced across saddles, Foster's men. More silhouettes closed behind us, blocking retreat. The canyon became a box full of gunsmoke and bad intentions. Caleb swung down, pulling Lena with him and shoving her behind a shoulder-high boulder. I hit the ground beside them, revolver already barking. The air smelled of sulfur and horse sweat. Every report ricocheted between the walls, turning my heartbeat erratic. I could feel Lena's ragged breaths on my neck, fast, shallow, terrified. Caleb leaned around the rock, sighted, fired. One rider toppled sideways, boot caught in a stirrup, horse galloping mad while he dragged. Another bullet cracked and chipped the stone inches from Caleb's ear, sending crimson down his cheek. He flinched back. I fired blind over the top, useless except to keep heads down. That's when Foster himself rode into view, hulking in the saddle like a bear, shotgun leveled. He shouted something I couldn't hear over the roar of blood in my ears. Caleb tried to draw a bead, but a rifleman on the ridge pinned him, shots sparking off rock every time he moved. We were trapped. Lena's hand touched my arm. Her eyes were wide but steady. "Your shotgun," she whispered. Before I could answer, she yanked it from my grip breech already loaded and crawled to a cleft between stones. I started to pull her back. She shook her head once, calm and absolute, and raised the barrel the way a person does something they've practiced in dreams. Her father took her fowl hunting, she'd said last night. The rider on the ridge stood to reload. She exhaled, squeezed. The boom shook the canyon. The rifleman jolted, arms windmilling, then pitched backward off his horse. The animal reared and bolted. Silence followed, shocked. Disbelieving silence broken only by Lena's own gasp as she stared at the smoking gun in her hands. Caleb made the most of it. He vaulted the boulder, sprinted under the rifleman's perch, and dragged Foster from his saddle. They hit the ground in a churn of dust. I left cover too, firing until the revolver clicked empty, driving the remaining riders behind fallen rocks. By the time I reloaded, Caleb and Foster were rolling in the dirt, fists landing like hammers. Foster slammed Caleb's head against a stone. Caleb answered with an elbow, then straddled him, forearm across his throat. "Worth less than piss to her own kin," Foster rasped, spitting blood. That's all she was. Caleb's face twisted something primal, almost animal. He drew back his fist once, twice, ready to crush bone. Foster's eyes bulged. His hand scrabbled for the knife on his belt. "Caleb!" Lena's voice rang. "Over everything?" She was beside me now, shotgun lowered, fear and purpose battling in her expression. "Don't, please." The canyon held its breath. Caleb's fist hovered, knuckles white. Then he shoved Foster onto his back and stood, chest heaving. Muddy sunrise washed his face pink and gold, like forgiveness fighting with fury. I strode over, revolver raised. Foster glared, still gasping. I tossed him my canteen. "You're going to write," I said, pulling a pencil stub and folded sheet from my vest. "Every debt, every name, every hand in this filth. And you'll sign it before you bleed out." He spat again, but the fight had leaked out of him. I pressed the barrel to his collarbone. Caleb wrenched the knife away and handed me my penknife. Instead, Foster's shaking hand scrawled across the page ink, mixing with drops from his cut lip, turning letters rusty. When he hesitated, Caleb aimed Foster's own shotgun at his boot and blew the heel clean off. Foster kept writing. When it was done, I tucked a confession inside my vest. We bound his wrists with his reins and lashed him to a dead cedar stump at the canyon mouth. Caleb tied a white scrap of Lena's torn dress to the stump of flag. "For the marshals who'd be along soon enough?" Foster tried one last sneer. "Ain't no court out here?" he croaked. "There's always a court," I said, mounting up. "Sometimes it just looks like 3 people and a sunrise." We left him shouting after us, curses echoing off the stone until distance swallowed them. The horses stumbled out of Devil's Gulch and into open foothills where the first light spilled, thin and blood-red, painting the sage like embers. Lena rode in front of Caleb now, shoulders squared. She looked back at the canyon only once, eyes shining not with tears but something fiercer. Caleb reached around her, took the reins, and guided us toward the jagged line of mountains where morning was breaking wider and brighter with every hoofbeat. I felt the confession warm against my heart, each word a weight and a promise. Terror was fading, replaced by something harder to name. The sense that the 3 of us had crossed a line tonight and could never ride back. Behind us, Devil's Gulch narrowed to a thin scar on the landscape. Ahead the sky opened crimson at first, then gold writing a future none of us yet understood but all of us had bled to claim. The horses crested the last rise just as first light spilled over the high country, turning the ridge into a vein of burning copper. Below us a meadow unfurled, thick with wild lupin so blue it seemed the sky had fallen and taken root. In the middle of the flowers slouched a small log cabin roof, half-sagged, door hanging crooked, smoke-hole dark as a dead eye. Caleb reined in and drew a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest for years. "My claim," he said, voice almost shy. "Never figured I'd bring anyone here." Lena's fingers tightened on his coat, and I felt the last tension in my spine soften. No riders behind us. No echoes of gunfire. Just wind sliding through pine and the scent of morning on the flowers. We stabled the horses under a lean-to and pushed inside. Dust motes drifted in the single shaft of sun that broke through the roof planks. A plank table, 2 chairs, a rusted stove, and a bunk with a blanket the color of old ash. That was the sum of it. Yet the air felt kinder than any saloon backroom I'd slept in. Caleb slumped onto a stool, blood from the graze on his arm soaking. His sleeve. I heated water, laid out needle and thread, and set to work. He didn't flinch while I stitched, just watched Lena through the doorway as she knelt at the creek a dozen yards off. She cupped water over her palms again and again, as if each rinse washed away another shard of last night's fear. Dawn burnished her hair until it looked forged from the same metal as the sun. When the wound was closed, I wrapped it with a torn strip of my shirt. "You'll keep the arm," I told him. He huffed a laugh. "Would have traded it for her safety. If I had to." Outside, Lena rose, sleeves rolled to her elbows, droplets shining on her skin. She crossed the meadow, the lupin parting around her like a tide, and stepped inside just as Caleb set a small leather pouch on the table. The coins inside clinked a bright, hopeful sound. "Your life is yours," he said, pushing it toward her. "Spend it however you choose." She looked at the pouch, then at him, and instead of taking it, she closed his fingers over the drawstring. "Then let's invest together," she whispered. Her other hand cupped his cheek, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved, as though kissing might break the fragile spell of safety. When their lips met, it was slow, careful, like leaning into a promise they'd spend years learning to keep. I turned away, giving them the small courtesy of privacy, and began checking my saddle. The confession sat in my vest pocket, heavier than any revolver. Thorn Creek would spit when I rode in waving Foster's own signature, but spit can't snuff truth. "You sure you want to go back alone?" Caleb asked behind me, voice rough from that first taste of hope. I cinched the girth. "Town's been rotting from the inside too long. Somebody has to drag the mess into daylight. Might as well be the barkeep who's sick of wiping the same blood off the same floorboards." Lena laid a hand on my armlight. "Grateful, steady. Come back when it's done," she said. "There'll be coffee on the stove and work to share?" I nodded, swallowing a lump I hadn't expected. The sky was full day now, water-clear blue stretching forever. As I led my horse outside, Caleb and Lena stood in the doorway, silhouettes framed by gold as the sun cleared Redemption Ridge. Their joined hands formed the smallest bridge in a world that loved building chasms. I swung into the saddle. "I went looking for justice," I said, adjusting the brim of my hat, "and found a future that wasn't mine to keep but worth bleeding for." Caleb tipped 2 fingers off his brow in salute. Lena smiled, a real one this time, nothing ghostly about it. I squeezed my heels, and the horse turned toward the valley, the confession a warm buzz against my heart. Behind me their laughter, lifted, bright, and surprised, chasing me down the trail long after the cabin dropped from sight, and the meadow folded back into the endless sweep of sage and sky.